first superpower we're going to look at is how do we transform regret into compassion. Years ago, I led a workshop in South Africa after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had started. And after the workshop, somebody, and I so wish I could find that person again and acknowledge how meaningful the story was to me. That person told me about being with a tribe and how that tribe dealt with shame. When in that tribe, when somebody did something wrong, the people would gather around this person, circling around. And maybe you're like me, and the minute I started hearing that, I was like, something bad's going to happen, right? Imagining a crowd gathering, circling. I don't know. I was worried about threat, hostility, and aggression, but no. That is not what would happen. In this circle, the people would stand around the person and tell him and her or them over and over and over again all the things they've done right, all the wonderful qualities about them, all the good things that they were, how they meant to this person, reminding them, this person in the middle of the circle, the person who had done something wrong, about why they were good and why they were wonderful and valuable. The group of people provided a countertone to the inner shame that somebody was feeling by holding up a mirror of who that person really is. Not what they did wrong, but mirroring back who their true nature was. Pretty powerful, right? That story stuck with me now for 34 years, however long it's been. So imagine for you what that would be like. Because what this story brilliantly describes is how shame activates what we wanted but might not have had. Even as shame activates fears of not being wanted, loved, cared about, respected, valued, shame also activates very powerfully our attachment longing to be seen, known, and loved. So how do we transform shame into compassion? How does this become a superpower that we can build into our lives? That shame imprint in us is that there's something wrong with me, something I can't change. It's as if we know without a doubt that there's something wrong with me, that I have a flawed DNA. And as we practice compassion and as we begin to transform the shame, regret is going to arise. Regret that I grew up in this human experience with these situations, these conditions, with these parents, with this family, with this, whatever it is. Or regret that because of the circumstances of my life, I've reacted a certain way. Regret that I behaved in ways I'm not proud of. I might have a profound regret for the anger and blame that I had toward others, or that I felt that they're having on me, the painful relationships. So regret around these painful relationships. And then there's also regret around the certain ways which grow into remorse and a willingness to do things differently. Now, I'm going to suggest a journaling practice that you may or may not want to do, which is to take some time to write or draw about the conditions you grew up in that led to these behaviors inside of you and behaviors of others. How might compassion help you hold these situations different? Inside of you, situations outside, the conditions and the relationships with yourself and with others. Let's look a little bit more at cultivating compassion. Every permutation of shame holds the schema that has the outside world turning against us, combined in some way with living in an inner world of self-criticism, hostility toward ourselves that converge on self-persecution. Whether the force of shame comes from the outside or from inside or both, the force field of shame is overwhelming and sets us up to fragment in some way. When the threat system is activated, there's a need to shut down immediately. Whenever threat is activated, we no longer feel there's a safe place inside our own skin or outside with anyone else. In those moments, It's hard for us to figure out how to calm or soothe this torrential distress, which can last for days or weeks, often in compartmental ways, but sometimes it's taking over a whole system. Even if people try to reassure us, it feels impossible to get through the intensity of shame that we're in. When we have a break in the intensity and we crawl out of that shame attack, we find ourselves submerged in negative beliefs about ourselves that become more and more concrete. We believe, and this isn't a feeling, it's deeply felt, that we're not deserving love, compassion, goodness. And we feel like we're a loser for even needing those qualities. This makes shame one of the biggest blocks to connection, to affiliation, to caring, and to having the soothing emotions that we need. And we need to cultivate these safe connections with others and with ourselves. So there can be some kindness and understanding, support, and validation. We need that externally, and we need that internally as part of healing shame. The paradox of shame has us connect to the shaming other out there, which then becomes a shaming internal person inside of us, a part of us that shames us, and disconnects us from our core self and our inner wisdom. As we become conscious of how we fall into the shame vortex, we need to distinguish the active and passive shaming that occurs. Now, active shaming comes from an introject or an external person. Maybe they're saying, you little something, or you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't do that. Passive shaming occurs from the failure to be seen, recognized, or responded to when we're in our core self state. Which brings us back to the importance of practice. As our practice takes root, we downregulate the threat system, and our inner and outer worlds will begin to feel safer. It's easier then to explore and have a wider perspective on life, to broaden and build, as the researcher Barbara Fredrickson describes. Almost miraculously, we're going to have a greater capacity to reflect, and transformation becomes more feasible. So now let's go into another practice, each designed to help you deepen your practice of compassion.